intellectual muscles might. Modernism, a grandparent still speaking at the table, it makes us trust our ears, steady, able to see it, hear it, to touch it is a must. But when under attack, not even your senses can you trust. Of course, I am from the ghetto. And so that's difficult because I'm also educated. I went to college and I got the debt to prove it. So when I'm in my elders meetings, oh gosh, 6 of the greatest, most powerfully spiritual men at the Holmes Rd Church, where I currently pastor. It just so happens that because they're a room full of men, and I got my own trauma in my life with men, older men, some stuff with my daddy that I won't bore you with. I love my daddy, but he was tripped sometimes. At any rate, he died when I was 21. I still grieve that. I'm moving on. In the meetings, from time to time, I can be tripped. Especially like, you're trying to run a church and you're trying to add to the ministry and you're trying to love the people that God has entrusted you to love, but of course, in some places inside of your inner being, you're still a child. And so we were just talking about something and some conflict had happened, and though I don't like conflict, I find myself always in conflict. At any rate, it's 6 elders at the table, and it's 2 ministers, myself and my co-minister Cameron. Jonathan wasn't there, lucky him, and then our apprentice wasn't there, lucky him. And so we're just going around the table, and we are talking honestly about some things, and these are good men, great men, spiritual men, the most spiritual men I have known to run a church. I know my soul is safe under their care. At any rate, one of them had the nerve, as I was speaking about the conflict, to say to me, yeah, but you don't have to say that, and you don't have to go there. You don't have to bring that up. What I'm saying is that he interrupted me. And he just was like, you don't need to say that. And see, so because of my trauma, I felt super offended. Because what you're not going to do is tell me what I can't say. Because we all in here talking, and y'all go around the table talking about stuff off topic every meeting. And so 2.5 hours into the meeting, you tell me what I can't say. I don't think so. I'm going to say what I'm going to say. And then don't try to undergird it with, oh, but I don't know if you're on task. I don't know if you're on topic. Oh, that's what we're doing now? You finna tell me I'm not on task and I'm not on topic? Look around and listen. Play back the meetings. No one's on task. No one's on topic. For crying out loud, it's an elders meeting. When was that ever required for any elders meeting anywhere? And so then, I pulled my grandmother's tactic. My grandmother, because she wasn't legally blind, she wore dark shades inside of buildings. And so she would go up and speak to people, and she would intimidate people. Because number one, she had on dark shades. She couldn't take the sunlight. But when you was trying to get crazy at the water bill place, or somebody trying to cheat grandmother, we were always with her. She'd take her glasses off, and she'd say, wait a minute. That's when I go off on you. I want you to do what? See my eyes. I just thought that on a scale of 1 to 10, I was at a 3. But I decided I need to meet with this elder because this is not the first time this has happened, and I'm offended. I don't want to go home offended, so I need to meet with this man. And so then I asked him, can you meet with me after the meeting, a post-meeting? And so then I say I'm offended. And then, of course, he puts me to shame by saying, okay, so first of all, I wasn't saying that at all. Second of all, I'm very sorry if I offended you. That was the furthest thing from my mind. Third of all, you should probably think more on your responses and your reactions in conflict. Because he, being a vice president at FedEx, he says, if I was in a corporate meeting and you acted the way you did, I would have excused everyone else and just went with you. I was shocked. And so then, of course, I told him about my trauma, and I cried for about 20 minutes. With the staff meeting on the next day, I talked to my co-minister. I said, Cameron, now, you have to level with me on a scale of 1 to 10, the conflict and the way I was acting. What was it? He said, about a 9. And I was like, what? I promise I was at a 3. He was like, no. I was super uncomfortable, and half of us started to leave the room. And I was like, well, that would have made it easier for him, because it's this was corporate America, he would have dismissed you. Here, high up in the Ivory Tower, your eyes are strengthened and given power, taught to strain out the floating things in light, intellectual muscles, might. Modernism, a grandparent still speaking at the table. It makes us trust our ears, steady, able to see it, hear it, to touch it. It's a must. But when under attack, not even your senses can you trust. And so there was once when I was doing a mission trip, I went to Boston and we were working with a church there, and it was about 15 of us. Whenever we had spent maybe about a day working, another young man who was to join us there, we received word that he was in fact coming. He didn't get on the plane with us, and he did not arrive with us there from the start. And no one knew the reason as to why. And so then a day in, I was leading the trip, and so the minister, he comes to me and he says, Christopher is coming, he's to arrive today. Please make sure to encourage him. That's all he said. Just make sure to encourage him. I said, okay, sure. I consider myself an encouraging person, of course. And so when he gets there, he is acting sort of strangely, but it's nothing that we are put off by. It's nothing that noticeable. It's just that maybe because I was given a heads up to encourage him, I was maybe looking for something. At any rate, we did some mission work there in Natick and the surrounding areas, and then as a free day, we went into the city, and we were in Harvard Square at this restaurant. I think it was a Mexican restaurant. Imagine how awful it was, Mexican in Boston. Anyway, here we are sitting, and it's a table of about 16 of us, and he becomes increasingly disturbed for reasons I don't know. He's sitting to my left. And so then I'm just checking on how you're doing, attempting to be encouraging, and then he becomes a little more disturbed. Halfway through the dinner, he actually stands, begins shouting and promising us that he is not the Antichrist. And so then, because it's making such a scene, we all attempt to leave, gather the people, trying to keep everyone calm. I pull a couple of the people that I was with to the side, and I say, this young man is having some type of mental break. We're gonna have to get him back. Something's not right. I don't know what is the nature of the mental break, but I need to get back to the minister who told me to encourage him, because he knows. Of course, we then leave Harvard Square. We get onto the subway, and while there on the platform, we're waiting, and it's all these people around. We're in the middle of Boston, and he's talking to himself. He's clearly and very visibly agitated, and I'm trying to comfort him. About halfway through the wait for the subway that seemed to not come, the train that seemed to just be somewhere across the country, like it just took so long to come, he is inching his way forward to the edge of the platform, and I asked him, bro, you're gonna have to come back from the platform. You're gonna have to come back from the platform. We, after what seems to be hours and hours, he's still getting more and more agitated. We get to the car. The minister is in the front seat. I join him in the back seat, and so I can only see the minister's eyes through the rearview mirror as he looks up through the rearview mirror to Christopher, who is sitting on my left in the back seat of the vehicle. And he says, Christopher, what is going on? And then he says, I am not, vehemently he says, I am not the Antichrist. The minister, through the rearview mirror, his eyes, he says, is it the voices? Is it the men telling you that you're the Antichrist? He says yes. And of course, when he says yes, I start hearing the theme music to the Twilight Zone in the background. He then, looking through the mirror, says, well, why don't you just tell him to shut up? That starts a long, just staggered church. We try to calm him down. He's not calm. We finally calm him down. We go back to the minister's house, which is just right next door to the church, to try to regather ourselves. We take him medication. He's at the church. We decided to lock him in the church because it is for his safety. We are trying to regroup to see how are we going to handle this situation. Midway, a man who is performing maintenance in the church bursts through the doors of the front of the minister's house, and he says, Christopher has escaped. Christopher has burst through the locked chain doors, and now he is running loose on the streets of Boston. Though it was March, it had snowed 13 inches, and so, like flashing light, we all ran out of the house, one of us to the right, one of us to the left, and then another up the hill at the back of the house, which was a freeway that he had to run across. It turned out that Chris had been off of his medication. He suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. The thing that kept him from joining us at the first of the trip was that his doctor had not cleared him. He thought he was fine a couple of days into the trip and decided to stop taking his medication. He was, in fact, suicidal. When I found him, having run to him all down the street, walking back to me, I was completely out of breath. The tears I was crying was almost frozen on my face. And so then we escorted him into a mental facility. Here, high up in the Ivory Tower, your eyes strengthened and given power, taught to strain out the floating things in light intellectual muscles, might. Modernism, a grandparent, still speaking at the table, it makes us trust our ears, steady and stable. To see it, to hear it, to touch it is a must. But when under attack, not even your senses can you trust. The Satan, Satan, what the scriptures refer to as the adversary. He pops up in the scriptures over and over again. He is the definition of just anti, this presence, just against stuff, just anti. I just don't like it, and I'm just going to throw a fit spiritually every day to prove it. He is ultimately the deceiver. The Bible says this in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 13.
Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this that you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate."
Interestingly, the word here, Hebrew, hisiani, to cheat, to deceive, to entertain false hopes. If you're a real Christian and you're following your King James version of the Bible, it's going to use the term to beguile, to utterly deceive, to deceive. Absolutely. Interestingly, this word also means to lend in interest, to be a creditor. And so when you try to add some of these things up together to make sense of what the Satan did with Eve, it's sort of sensible that creditors, lenders do deceive. The worst deceivers I know is Capital One. Sure, you should take this $1,000 as an 18-year-old in college. By the time you pay the $1,000 back, it will be $100,000 because of all the fine print there on the paper deceiving us. The Bible also says in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3.
But I am afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his cunning, your thoughts will be led astray from a sincere and pure devotion to Christ. Again,
the word deceive, the Greek exepatesin, to deceive and to cheat. Paul referring back to the very thing that we find in Genesis. The devil having caught on to Eve, convincing her of something that isn't true, deceiving her. The Bible continues on in Revelation 20, verses 7 through 10.
And when the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations that are at the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them for battle. Their number is like the sand of the sea. And they marched up over the broad plain of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. But fire came down from heaven and consumed them. And the devil who had deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet were. And they will be tormented day and night forever and ever.
I won't make a mockery of the book of Revelation with my own interpretation. I wouldn't do that to you or to Dr. Oster. Instead, we'll look only at the word deceive as it appears here, that once again, the Satan, this adversary, his job, his method is to deceive. na'o, to deceive, that word there, to lead astray, to cause, to wander about, to eventually be mistaken. As it turns out, the devil is real. As it turns out, because we are highly intellectual, because we've intellectualized faith, because we are safe here in the Ivory Tower, because we are still battling with the idea of hearing things to believe them, seeing things to believe them, touching things to believe them, this modern way of thinking. It's still here, though we're sort of postmodern and whatever will become after that. We're still focusing on things that help us to feel comfortable and powerful, things that we know based on what we can see, based on what we can hear, based on what we can touch. And so because of this phenomenon, we often just don't believe what our grandparents did and what many other strong Christians in other parts of the world do even today. That's just the ugly devil, Satan, acting a fool. As it turns out, he is deceiving. He's leading us astray. And it can be very difficult. Sometimes in my experience, I've seen that he deceives first, or maybe one way, with illusions. It's sort of like when you're talking to one of your elders and you swear up and down that this man trying to disrespect me. And one thing you're not going to do is disrespect me. I'm not the one, bro. And then you want to start calling out what street you grew up on and what part of town you're from in Dallas, because we don't do that where I come from. When really the man was just literally saying, hey, bro, we agree with that. There's no need for you to say that. We're on the same page. Instead, there was an illusion from without, a deceiving spirit that I had caught on to even that moment, to think that he, the nicest man, one of my greatest supporters, one of the most godly people at the whole church, would disrespect me in the midst of other people. It was my own trauma. It was my own issues that took that from him. And it was just an illusion. I could have sworn that he was trying to disrespect me. As it turns out, it was all an illusion. He was like, bro, I don't even know what meeting he was in. The devil deceives us by illusions, things from without. But not just by illusions, things from without, but also by delusions, things from within. When I think about Christopher, my friend, who came and who arrived late and who had a mental breakdown in the middle of Boston, he later on said, there was a group of men in my head, and they were convincing me that everyone that I came into contact with, that they were in danger because I was building and constructing a community in hell. And if you came into contact with me, then you would be put in that community. It was a picture of men, an abstract picture in the home of the minister. And he actually saw the men in his head in the picture. And there was one moment when he was arguing with the picture. And I'm thinking to myself, what's happening? And that's how the devil does. First, he can get you from without, just making things appear one way when they're really not. But then he can also get you from within, tricking you in your own thoughts, tricking you in things that you think you know but you really don't know. And it's happening all the time. It's happening right now in your life. In your relationships, it's not really happening that way. It's happening another way. You are just being deceived by illusion and delusion. It's happening in your marriage. It's not that bad, or it's not that good. You're just being deceived with illusion and delusion. It's happening in your personal life, with the way that you need to do better with how you think, with how you act, with what you do, with what you don't do, with the sin that you struggle with. It's the devil deceiving you. It's just through illusion and delusion. It's happening right here in school. When I was at HST, I thought this was the worst thing that was happening to me. And in some ways it was. In other ways, it was just an illusion, a delusion, a trap meant to get me off, meant to make me wander, to make me go astray. It was meant to promise me something, but like a debt collector. It's telling me, oh, it's really worth this. And you can really pay it back with this amount, but really, once it's done, it takes your whole life away. It's happening that way in the churches. That we are thinking, oh, I should split this church for this reason, and I should instead start another one for this reason, or I should depose the king of this church for this reason, or keep him here for this reason. It's it's happening in the churches because ultimately we're being deceived by illusion and delusion, things that are covering the truth from without and from within. And so what we need to do is take very much care to not be too smart to believe the truth. That what you see is normally a great way to determine the truth. What you hear is normally a great way to determine the truth. What you feel and touch is normally a great way to determine the truth until you're being deceived. When you're under attack from the devil, what you see is not the truth. What you hear is not the truth. What you touch is not the truth. So you can't even trust your own traumatized, sinful, evil instincts. Because under attack, all the things that work, that we learn, well, go check it out for yourself. Read it. I got to see it to believe it. Well, sure, that's all fine when it comes to your budget, your taxes, you know what I'm saying? When it goes to your broke arm, the x-rays, but those rules don't work. When the devil is staring you down face to face, telling you, oh no, this is a flower, when instead it's a snake. Here, high up in the Ivory Tower, your eyes strengthened and given power. Taught to strain out those floating things that appear in light, intellectual muscles, might. Modernism, a grandparent, still speaking at the table. It makes us trust our ears, steady, able. To see it, hear it, to touch it is a must.